My name is Naomi Reyes. I'm 36. For 11 years, my family believed I did paperwork for a shipping company in Portland. Then on a Sunday morning in July, my mother stood in her kitchen, held both my hands, and asked me to tell the harbor police. I was driving our family's boat the night it dragged a man under the dock. A man was in the ICU with a shattered leg and a punctured lung. My sister had been at the wheel. My father did the math out loud the way he always does. She's got the marina deal closing next month. You don't have anything riding on this. My sister didn't even put her phone down. She smiled and asked who was going to believe me anyway. There was already a lawyer at the kitchen table before anyone asked me one question. What none of them knew about my job, about what that boat had been quietly recording, and about the man lying awake in a hospital bed waiting for the truth. Took this family apart over the next 6 weeks. Welcome back to Echoes of Betrayal, where quiet people finally tell the stories their families made sure nobody heard. Stay with me. This one has more turns than you expect. I drove 4 hours to Cedar Harbor, Maine because my niece asked me to. Reagan texted me in June. Grandpa's turning 70. Please come with a little anchor emoji. And that was enough. I hadn't been home in almost 2 years. The house looked exactly the same, which is its own kind of insult. Green shutters my father repaints every spring. A banner for the marina's 40th anniversary, and in the front hallway, a wicker basket where every set of boat keys goes the second you walk in. My mother started that when I was 9. She calls it organization. It's really surveillance. I put my keys in the basket like everyone else. In the living room, there's a wall of framed photos, and I'm in 8 of them. The newest one is from a graduation 11 years ago. After that, the wall just keeps going without me. My father found me by the cooler and introduced me to a county councilman. "This is our oldest," he said. "She does something with logistics up in Portland." I shook his hand and let it stand because I always let it stand. Being invisible was the one thing this family let me be good at. By 10, the party had thinned to the people who don't leave. My sister Bree was still going, the way she's been going since 17. She has a face that knows exactly where the camera is, even when there isn't one. She'd had a few drinks, not a lot by her standards, which is its own sentence. Someone remembered the anniversary banner had blown into the water and needed retrieving before the photographer arrived. My mother said it could wait until sunrise. Bree said it could not, because the marina buyer's visit ran on photos like these, and it would look disorganized. That was her word, disorganized. I said goodnight and went up to my old room. Second door past the stairs, my childhood twin bed and a closet full of my mother's winter coats. I heard the hallway from upstairs. You always do. The keys shifting in the wicker basket, then the screen door. I read a while. Around 11:30, I heard the boathouse door go up and down. Then 2 voices in the kitchen low, the way people talk when trying not to wake someone. It sounded like arranging, not arguing. I fell asleep. When I came down for water past midnight, the basket was empty. Not one set of keys, in a house with 3 boats at the dock. I noticed it the way you notice a picture hanging crooked, then went back upstairs and didn't think about it for 2 days. I should have. The local news came on at 7 while I made coffee. A dock worker had been struck by a boat near the private slips before midnight and dragged before the propeller cut clear. He was 58, critical condition at Cedar Harbor General. Witnesses described a white cruiser heading out fast, running lights off. I stood there with the coffee pot in my hand and felt the house change temperature. My father had been in his office, door shut since 6, which never happens on a Sunday, and I could hear him on the phone, using the voice he saves for people who owe him something. Bree didn't come down. My mother said she had a migraine. I went out from my bag and found my mother, already outside in a cardigan over her nightgown, wiping the boathouse frame with a dish towel. At 7:15, she smiled and said the salt spray this year was unbelievable. The Sea Fox was tied at the end of the dock, angled wrong against the current. I walked down. The bow rail had a fresh dent, a pale scrape near the waterline, and the whole hull was clean. Not clean like a boat, clean like somebody had gone at it with the hose for an hour. My mother came down the dock behind me and didn't ask what I was looking at. She just said, "Come inside, Naomi, family meeting." Kurt Holloway was already at the kitchen island. He's been my father's lawyer since before I could drive a boat. He had a legal pad and a mug of coffee, finished, which told me what kind of morning this was. They hadn't called a lawyer after they talked to me. They'd called a lawyer instead of talking to me. My father sat and did not say good morning. They started talking, and I want you to understand how, because it's the whole thing. Nobody said, "Is he going to live?" Nobody said the man's name. They said exposure the next 48 hours. Kurt said manageable outcome twice. Underneath it all, the facts assembled themselves like furniture out of a box. Bree had taken the keys at 11:30. Taken the Sea Fox because it was fueled and closest. Bree had been drinking since 4. Had come back at midnight with a dented rail and hadn't called anyone. And my mother had made her tea. Nobody had called the Coast Guard. A man had lain against the pilings for over 15 minutes before another dockhand found him. Then Kurt slid a sheet of paper across the granite. Already typed, already dated, a confession, mine. I read it twice. It said I had taken the boat out, that I was unfamiliar with the channel markers, that I had panicked and cut the engine too late. Somebody had put the word panicked in my mouth at 7 in the morning. My mother came around the island and took both my shoulders, looked at me with more warmth than she'd shown in 3 years. "Just say you were driving," she said plainly, like she was helping. I asked if she understood what she was asking. She said she understood exactly, and that's why it had to be me. No kids, no local business, no reputation anyone in this town could name. My father didn't get up. He looked at me over the counter and laid it out the way he'd lay out a budget line. "She's got the deal closing. You don't have anything riding on this." The whole family ledger said out loud in front of a lawyer, and not one person at that island flinched. Bree came in then in a sweatshirt, hair up, no makeup, and poured orange juice while I told them no. I said it once, evenly, then again because the first didn't seem to register. Kurt said we should all take a breath. My father said we didn't have time for that. My sister leaned against the counter with the glass in her hand and looked at me the way you look at a dog doing a trick badly. She wasn't even angry, which was worse. "Who's going to believe you anyway?" she said. I picked up my coat off the chair. I got as far as the doorway. Then my father said one more thing, and it stopped me with my hand on the frame. "Bree already gave her statement," he said. "This morning at 7. Your name is in it." I turned around. Kurt wouldn't look at me, which is how I knew it was true, and how I knew he'd helped write it. She'd told an investigator her sister was visiting from out of town, had asked about the channel markers, had taken the boat out around 11:30. Not an accusation. Better than one. A helpful detail from a cooperative family. I stood in that doorway and did the arithmetic they were certain I couldn't do. The boat is registered under my name on the family LLC paperwork, a detail I'd signed years ago without reading closely. Witnesses saw a white cruiser and part of a hull number. I'd been asleep, alone, with no one to say otherwise. And the first person to hand police a story owns the shape of it. Everyone who comes after is just disagreeing. My father watched me work it out and thought what he saw on my face was fear. It wasn't. It was recognition. I had spent 9 years reviewing exactly this kind of case for a living, and almost none turned on evidence. They turned on who got there first. I put my coat back on the chair, not because they'd won, because leaving that morning would have been the single most useful thing I could have done for them. They knew a version of me 11 years out of date, and had never once checked whether it had been revised. That was their first mistake. It was not going to be the expensive one. I should tell you what happened when I was 25. The whole foundation of this house. I failed my licensing exam the first time. A third of my class failed that year, a footnote in most lives. But it happened 6 weeks before my father's marina expansion vote. And a man courting the town council needs a story that makes him human. At a chamber dinner in front of 100 people who buy fuel and sell insurance, he told them his oldest had gone off for her fancy federal license and washed out. He shrugged, said you can't win them all, and the room laughed and he got the warmth he needed. My mother stood right next to him. Afterward, in the parking lot, I asked how she could let him say that. She fixed my collar, gentle about it. We don't have truths in this family, sweetheart, she said. We have versions. I passed my exam in December. I never told them. I took a job 400 miles away and learned something in year 1 that I mistook for wisdom for the next decade. If you don't tell people anything, they can't take anything. So I stopped telling them things, stopped correcting the logistics joke, stopped sending news. When I was sworn into my actual role years later, I stood alone and signed the paperwork myself because I hadn't invited a single person who shared my last name. I told myself the silence was dignity. It took a man lying against a piling to show me what it actually was. Here's what none of them knew. I'm a federal marine casualty investigator. I work for the agency that determines what happened, mechanically and factually when a boat hurts somebody, and I've spent 9 years reading black box data, the way other people read a grocery list. The Sea Fox, like every boat built after 2019, had one running the whole time nobody was watching. People think a modern boat is just a boat. It isn't. It's a witness that never blinks and doesn't care who owns it. The Sea Fox has a chart plotter that logs GPS position every few seconds, an engine module that records throttle and speed continuously, and a fob ignition tied to whichever key was used, down to the minute. I sat in the cockpit Monday morning, one foot still on the dock, and turned the display on without touching anything else. The last recorded key profile wasn't mine and wasn't my father's. It was the spare fob kept in the console. The one everyone in the family knows opens with a code nobody bothered to change. The trip log showed a route at 11:31 that night, running dark, no navigation lights active, ending at 11:56 near the private slips, exactly where the dock worker had been found. I looked at it a long moment, turned the screen off, and did not touch that boat again. I want to be clear why, because it's the most important decision in this story. I've watched evidence get thrown out for exactly this mistake. If I pulled that data myself, as the person they were accusing, every hour becomes a question about me instead of them. At breakfast, Kurt mentioned the family would get the hull repainted. A boatyard in Delmore could take it Wednesday. I said that was thoughtful. Then I went upstairs and called my insurer directly. Told them in the flattest voice I own that a family-owned vessel may have been involved in an incident, while in the possession of another operator. That liability was unclear, and that I wanted the vessel preserved pending investigation. It took 12 minutes. The adjuster put a hold on the boat before lunch. No yard in 3 counties will touch a vessel with an open claim and a preservation hold, because they don't get paid and they do get sued. Nobody had to be told no. There was simply, from Monday on, no way to repaint that hull and no way to reset the trip log. The most boring thing I did all month. My father found out Tuesday when the boatyard called Kurt to cancel. He didn't mention it at dinner, just passed me the corn and looked at me a second longer than a person looks at their daughter. I drove to Cedar Harbor General on Wednesday and sat in the surgical waiting room for 2 hours in the corner, telling no one who I was because I had no business being anything else there. The injured man's wife was in the chairs by the window, Marion, with a tote bag and a crossword she never opened. A nurse came to update her, and Marion did what everyone does with medical people, tried to make him a person instead of an injury. She said he'd worked the dock crew 22 years and never once dropped a line, that the truck needed a transmission, and he'd decided to bike to work through October to save the difference. Because that's what he does. Decides things and does them, On the corkboard by the coffee machine, someone had pinned my sister's charity gala flyer, her face, that smile. I bought Marion a coffee she hadn't asked for and left before she could ask my name. Bree came to my motel on a Sunday night, alone, hood down, no phone in her hand. I have never in my adult life seen my sister with nothing in her hand. I let her in, and for 10 minutes she was a person I'd never met. She talked about being 16. A regatta dad had gotten her into through a friend, learning to hold a smile for a photographer's third try. She said when she got a C in chemistry, our father didn't speak to her for 4 days, said it like weather. Then she looked up. Do you know what it's like to be this family's only investment? I did know from the other side of it. She didn't apologize. That's the part I need you to hear. She never once said the injured man's name. Never asked how he was. What she'd come to do was trade. Take the plea, she said. You're strong enough to survive being the failure. I'm not. For a minute, I could see the sister I might have had in any other family. Then she stood, checked her reflection, touched her hair, and the campaign smile switched back on like a light. The hearing was set for Thursday, a preliminary review before charges were filed. My attorney, Denise Okafor, filed a sworn affidavit that morning, describing the empty key basket, the dented rail, the spare fob, the trip log, the typed confession with my name on it. Attached, a request that the prosecutor recuse himself, given his friendship with my father going back 3 decades, and a chain of custody report from a licensed marine technician who had pulled the Sea Fox's data module in a boatyard. Parking lot 2 days earlier, sealed and dated before I touched a single button myself. My father found out that morning when Kurt called to cancel a meeting. He was, I'm told, delighted once he understood what my job was. A federal investigator stepping forward instead of hiding. Could be reframed within a week. He'd found a way to spend my career before I'd finished a sentence about it. I let him finish on the porch. That was the moment I stopped hoping. Not the kitchen, not the confession, not the leak calling me estranged. Hope is the last thing they take, and they don't even take it on purpose. They just say what they think out loud and then it's gone. At the hearing, the room went quiet when Denise read my occupation into the record. My mother, in the second row, put her hand over her mouth, and I still don't know if it was for Bree or for me. The data matched, minute for minute, against the Marine Authority's independently pulled telematics. Bree pled in February, 60 days, 3 years probation, restitution, license suspended. She withdrew from local politics. My parents were never charged. Proving what my mother did with a basket of keys was never a case anyone could win. And I've made peace with that slowly. Ray went back to the docks part-time in spring on a stool they bolted down for him. I still stop by. He overcharges me for the pie, on purpose, every time. And it's the only bill in this story I've been glad to pay. My niece Reagan texted me a year later. Mom says I'm not supposed to text you, but nobody will tell me what happened. I told her the truth plainly, without making either parent a monster or innocent. She wrote back, "Thank you for saying it straight. Nobody ever says it straight in this family. Families run on versions, my mother always said, like it was just how the world worked. But I'm done auditioning for a kinder one. If your family only loves the version of you that stays convenient and useful, that was never love to begin with, the day you stop performing, for it is the day the rest of your life is finally allowed to start. That's my story. 1 empty key basket, 1 sealed data module, 1 signature I never gave. If someone in your life has you filed as the reliable one, hear me. You don't owe anybody a smaller version of yourself. If this stayed with you, tell me where you're watching from and subscribe. Because next week I'm telling you what happened when my mother asked to meet Ray